Hey, how's it going, do-it-yourselfers? Welcome to what I hope it's the last video in the series of replacing the head gasket on this Jaguar XJ6. So yeah, as you may remember in my previous videos, we went over how you can remove the cylinder head off of this Jaguar engine. We went over how you can clean the mating surface. We went over how you can check for warpage both on the cylinder head and the engine block. So now in this video, we're gonna go over how you can reinstall the cylinder head and put everything back together. And hopefully after this, our external coolant leak, which we had back there, is no more. So yeah, as you can see, I've modified this cherry picker a little bit just so that I can get more extension so that I can lower this cylinder head onto this engine. Now this is very important because if you don't do anything like this and you go to do this by hand, especially if it's just one person, and you put the cylinder head on top of the studs and then try to move it around to line it up with the studs so that you can push it down, you're just destroying the bottom, the mating surface of the cylinder head, and you're scratching it up, and that's no good. So this way, we can lower it slowly. We're still gonna have to rest it on the studs, but it's, we're not gonna move it around a whole lot, maybe adjust a half an inch or so that we can line it up with the studs and hopefully push it down that way. Now this cylinder head, when I hooked it up, it's slightly tilted backward. It's no big deal. We're just gonna lower it a little bit until the rear of it hits the studs, and then we'll go and adjust it and then lower it more, and then hopefully we can push this down even. I don't know if you guys are gonna be able to see it on camera. Right now it's moving. It stopped. We actually lined this up pretty good. Hopefully you guys can see. There's the stud holes on the cylinder head. They're very close. It's hitting in the back, so we're just gonna line it up there and lower it a little bit more. Gonna have to work blind here, but there. Now that's lined up. That should be lined up. That should be lined up. Now we'll see if we can lower it a tad more. I think we're in. Yep, these are all in the right hole. Everybody should be happy. Now before we push this all the way down, we're gonna get some paper towels and spray some brake clean on it and clean the mating surface one last time. Now we're just gonna keep on lowering it as even as we can. If we see that it's binding up to the front or to the back, we're gonna hold off and push that side down. It's going down pretty even on its own. That's pretty cool. Oh. Spoke too soon. Gonna lower it down a little bit more, and then we're gonna remove the straps. All right, now let's see if we can give it the final nudge. There it is. All right, so we're gonna start with our camshaft. I already got this one on. You run the 2 bolts by hand, making sure not to cross thread them. Also, you wanna make sure that in the back, all the marks we made on the camshaft and the sprocket line up. You don't wanna tighten them just yet. You wanna line up the other one as well. This is where we probably need to further loosen this chain tensioner. Again, make sure to twist this clockwise to loosen. Okay, so it feels like past a certain amount that you turn this to the left side, you'll start loosening this instead of tightening it. And then once you go backwards to the right side, you start loosening it once again. So this takes some fiddling. Just a heads up for those of you that are gonna be tackling this. Next, you wanna bend these locking tabs back. All right, next we need to take the slack out of the chain. Now, I didn't mark the position of the tensioner, but here you might be able to see how this timing chain is loose here. So we wanna turn this counterclockwise until that slack is out. Counterclockwise all the way. So yeah, as you might be able to tell, there's no more slack in this chain. It's nice and firm, should be good there. Next, once more, we do the old screwdriver on the starter trick to turn over the engine and get to the other bolts. All right, next up, our cylinder head nuts. I guess you want to run these down first by hand. Make sure you get started on the threads. Also make sure you don't forget the washer and this stuff. And I'm going to just run them down with this just to save time, and then we're going to come back and torque them down to 54 foot-pounds. By the way, let's not forget this adjuster nut. All right, next we're gonna come on this side and install our engine oil cooler lines. I think that's how they go. Famous last words. Then there's this pressure line that supplies pressurized oil to our camshafts. There's that. All right, now next up would be the intake manifold, but since I haven't done the electrical repairs to the wiring harness on this side, we're actually gonna jump around a little bit. We're gonna actually put the valve covers on, and then we're gonna go to the exhaust side. All right, now before we put on our valve cover, we're gonna get some clean engine oil and lube our camshaft lobes. Then we want to make sure we clean the mating surface for a valve cover gasket. And you want to put a small amount of RTV silicone right over where the half moon seal meets the top surface of your cylinder head. Next, we'll throw our new valve cover gasket on, and then put on our valve cover, and then put the copper washers back on, and then all these nuts. Also this T30 screw that goes in here. Same exact thing on this side. First the RTV, then the gasket, next the valve cover itself. Now this is gonna sound scarier than it is, but unfortunately we're missing one of our nuts. All right, next we're gonna install these nuts with these washers on these two bolts that go through the head, or through the engine rather, up front. And we do the exact same thing on the other side. All right, next up are exhaust manifolds. First, obviously, put the new exhaust manifold gaskets on. Then we're gonna run the nuts in by hand first. All right, then we'll tighten these down. So next it's time to install our air pump. I'm actually gonna try to get this started by hand from underneath. If that doesn't work, we're gonna have to remove this air pump from its bracket to put in this bolt. Yep, got a few threads started. Now we're gonna do the 3 bolts that go on this bracket. This top one has a spacer, and I think this bracket also went at the end of this bolt right here as well. So we'll just get a few threads started by hand, and then we'll run them down with our new best friend. Now we'll get this bolt with our long ratcheting wrenches. All right, next we're gonna install our other exhaust manifold. We already got our new gasket on. As usual, we'll go from the center out. Oh, this one went on super easy too. Must be my lucky day. All right, next we'll reinstall this heat shield. Next we'll install this pipe from our air pump. Next we come to this side, and it's time to install our intake manifold. As you can see, I've already installed our new intake manifold gasket. Goes without saying, you want to make sure the mating surfaces are completely clean. I've also replaced some of the wiring. I didn't have the same exact colors, but got them as close as I could. But I still wasn't able to replace all the wiring that was in poor shape. I just tried to get the worst ones. Hopefully this will be okay. We won't have any problems or any misfires in the future, but we'll see. Alrighty, there we go. If I remember correctly, this goes head first, or actually not, it goes bottom end first. And then you line everything up. And come on, there we go. And we obviously want to start from the center out. Now, one thing that's got me a little worried is that I don't know where some of these wires go. Now, I guess worry is not the right word, but it is making me think, however. Also, I'm going to be replacing these rubber portions of this fuel line. I should have done this before I put the intake manifold on. Dogs are going insane. What's up? Get yourself stuck? Yeah, he did get himself stuck. Oh, no, I guess not. You unstuck now? Trying to dig underneath the fence. Go put you guys inside. Butthead. And here's Beavis. Let's go inside. Come on. So yeah, we're gonna replace this rubber fuel line and this one as well. So I just installed some new rubber fuel lines on this line that goes to our fuel rail, and I think the next best step is to raise the car and get underneath and put in the bottom 3 nuts for our intake manifold and go on from there. All right, now we're underneath the car, and it's gonna be nearly impossible to show you, but we're putting on the 3 center nuts that are holding in our intake manifold to our cylinder head. And while we're down here, we're gonna reinstall this vacuum line that goes into our intake manifold down here. And then from up top, we'll finish putting on the rest of them. All right, next we'll install this coolant hose that goes to our water pump that will attach to the coolant pipe that goes on top of our intake manifold. All right, next we'll install our ignition amplifier that goes in the back of the intake manifold. Next, we're going to install these pressurized oil lines that go to the back of the cylinder head. You're going to need 2 crush washers, 2 copper crush washers for these. These came with my head gasket set. You want to just start them by hand. And then before you tighten up the first one, you want to get the other one started as well. Now we'll tighten them down. All right, next it's time for the fun one, which is this coolant pipe that goes on here like this. But first, we need to attach this vacuum line to this valve down here. And I replaced this because, as you may remember, when we took this off, the old one broke. But I should have probably made it just a little bit longer just to make this installation easier. All right, so here's something I almost forgot, and that is to install the gaskets where this coolant pipe attaches to the intake manifold. Now, in order to have this gasket stay in place, I'm gonna put tiny amount of RTV silicone around the outer edges. Now we're just gonna let these gaskets sit a little bit. All right, so now we're ready to install our water pipe, and hopefully we won't have the gaskets move while we do this. Again, don't know the torque spec for these, but we'll go with 17 foot-pounds. All right, next we're gonna install a few of these coolant hoses to our coolant pipe now. All right, next it's time to install our PCV housing. There are two paper gaskets that are gonna go on. One goes on first like this. Metal screen, make sure you clean this thoroughly, make sure it's not clogged. And if you have one of these cars and you suffer from lots of engine oil leaks, one reason could be that this screen here is clogged and not letting the pressure that builds up, the blow-by pressure that builds up inside the engine escape. So after that, you put on another paper gasket. By the way, these all came with my head gasket set. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but I'll show you guys in a minute. I got it from mossymotors.net or .com, if I remember correctly. Next comes the housing itself, and it's gonna go on like this. And then on these two longer bolts on here, there's another bracket that's for our tensioning mechanism for our air pump, if I remember correctly, that goes on here. And there are 4 nuts that hold these in. All right, next it's time to install our throttle cables. All right, now on to reinstalling the wiring harness. Now, as you may remember, our wiring harness, this guy right here, went right in between this valve cover and this coolant pipe. It went right behind here and went around. Now, I've decided not to put it there because it just gets way too hot over there. Also, as I mentioned before, I've done some repairs to some of the wiring. We'll see how that goes and if we can find where everything goes. But anyway, I've decided to move the wiring harness further out. I'm gonna have it out here. I'll zip tie it together after we're done and have it here. It'd be a lot cooler here. Now, as far as figuring out where everything goes, I'm not gonna say it's gonna be easy, but it's not gonna be super difficult either. You basically first put the fuel injectors in. Now, when you start back here, there's only one connector that will fit a fuel injector, so this first one has to be this one. And then you figure out the wiring harness is coming out of, and then you go on. The next one has to be this one, so on and so forth. You go down, you put all the 6 fuel injectors in, and then you come up here and see what's left. So for example, we'll have these 2 female connectors that have to go to this one. There's nowhere else within the vicinity of that sensor where these could go, so it has to be these 2. And then you figure out the remaining connectors, you find the right one, you put one goes there, there's gonna be another one that goes down here, one down here. So there's gonna be 3 of those connectors, and then one more female connector that will go to this sensor as well. In so many words, you work through the process of elimination. You put on the obvious ones first, and then you go on and put the rest, and hopefully they're kind of close to where they're supposed to be, and you can figure it out. And if not, there's always a wiring diagram. As far as we're concerned, when we changed some of the wiring, we didn't have the same exact color wire to replace it with the right one. So, I made notes, but hopefully it won't be too difficult to put everything back together. We'll see. All right, and after we get all the wiring in, even though there's a few wires that I'm not quite sure where they're supposed to go, next it's time to put in our air filter and MAF sensor housing. It slides on like that, and there's a bolt and a spacer that goes through up here. And actually, before we attach everything, let's connect our connector for our MAF sensor. It goes on like that. A bolt goes in here, I assume. Then we'll attach this guy. All right, next we get this rubber piece on our throttle body. Then get this elbow in. Next, we're gonna come to the front of the engine and reinstall our PCV elbow. Then we put the belt on for our air pump. Then we put the tensioning mechanism on. Then we'll tighten down these guys. Now it's time to put this bracing on, if I remember correctly. This is its orientation. Now all that's left is to raise the car and install our downpipe, install our oxygen sensor, fill it with coolant, and give it a go. All right, let's see. All right, so I got the engine back on the ground, put some coolant in the cooling system. I think we put about 2 gallons in there. Might need more. I'm using this spill-free funnel, not to bleed the system, but just to make the pouring of the coolant inside the engine easier. You don't need to use that for bleeding the system. This reservoir will pretty much act as that. Also goes without saying, I didn't get any single hose or connector that we put back on video because this video is long enough already. And you guys just want to see this engine run or explode. I know it. So yeah, next we're gonna get in the car, start the engine, turn the heater on, try to bleed the system, and if everything's gone according to plan, this engine should start. Actually, hold it. Since we have a completely empty fuel rail, we need to prime the fuel system. Now on most cars, you simply turn the key to the on position, wait 10-15 seconds, turn it off, turn it back on. Do that for a few times, and then that will get things going. On this car, it's a little bit different. You actually need to put the transmission into drive or reverse. And then hopefully if your neutral safety switch is working properly, you put the key in the ignition and you turn the key to start. And then that gets the fuel pump going. Actually I can hear the fuel pump going right now. And next we put the transmission back in park. And now we're gonna give it a go. Come on, baby. Woo, woo, woo. So there you have it. Engine runs and starts. It runs pretty good actually. We don't have any misfires, but we do have an exhaust leak on that side. That was expected because as we showed you earlier, they've done some modifications to the downpipe. It's a very common issue on these cars. The downpipes crack, and then you have to either weld them and replace them. With that exhaust leak, it sounds a lot stronger than it is. Also, this belt is a little bit loose. We'll have to adjust that. But now we're just gonna let it sit, warm up, reach operating temperature, and check for major leaks. We're gonna check back there, make sure that our, the whole reason why we did all this job, that external coolant leak in the back of the engine, has been fixed. All right, we've reached operating temperature pretty much. Now let's give you guys a shot of where we had that external coolant leak. As you may remember, it was right there. That's where we had that external coolant leak, and as you can see, it's super dry. We got no leaks of any kind there, so we fixed our issue, it seems. All right, now before we go, I think I have to own up to something. I do not remember where this goes. So yeah, I had this bolt with the tension mechanism for our air pump, but when putting everything back together, the mechanism, everything went back together fine, and there was no space or no holes to put this bolt in. So I have no idea where it goes, but of course, as you can see, everything looks okay. So yeah, basically all that's left is to fix that exhaust leak, obviously, tidy up the wiring, put the hood back on, of course, also look into the reason why it's running a little bit rough. And from there, just detail it and, go on, drive it and enjoy it for a while at least. Also, as some of you mentioned in the previous videos, yeah, this is a whole lot of work for a car that's this old with the mileage it has. That's 180-something thousand miles. But again, it's a very clean car. Both the exterior and interior are in really, really good shape. So it was worth saving for me. Also, this sort of work that you do on these cars, these are a bit of an investment. You're not just doing it just to do it once and, whatever, fix the car for yourself, save some money, or even sell the car, make a profit. This will have I'm going to use a big word, compounding effect. As in, if you're planning on working on these cars more in the future, like I am, you're now very familiar with all the mechanical work that these need, or what it entails to do a head gasket job on these, all the electrical work, all the problems with the connectors, the wiring, how all the little quirks that make these cars kind of difficult to work, so that the next time you have to do any type of work on these cars, it'll be a lot easier. So yeah, if you like this video or want to see the previous episodes for this series where we worked on the head gasket on this car, make sure you check out my videos in the suggestion box. Give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that bell notification. Also, there are some other videos on this side of the screen you can check out, and also in the description as well. All right, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.